right? Thanking and praising God, this time for the fact that he sees us. And even though that can be intimidating, especially in times when if our conscience is working effectively, we know we just need to be doing better. But beyond that, when we are genuinely trying to do better, he sees us to protect us and guide us along that path. So to the degree we are genuinely accepting his counsel as to how we can do better, let's thank and praise God. At least I want to thank and praise God for the fact that he sees and is trying to counsel me into better days by simply taking on better ways. And with that, chapter 9 of Zechariah is talking about the way that he sees his people, no longer for the things that they used to do that simply needed to change, but now he sees them for the protection he is providing them now that they are making better choices. And so with that, the first few verses are going to talk about the way in which, once again, he is going to clear out the problems around them that threaten their progress, as he then talks about their, once again, restoration. Taking it bit by bit, though, the first 4 verses are going to begin talking about some of those nations that he is going to deal with around them that have been a persistent problem. This time he's going to start talking about Hadrach and Damascus, 2 cities in Syria. Damascus being a thing even in present-day Syria to this day. Verses 2 and 3 are going to talk about 2 cities that were a big thing then but are no longer a thing, Tyre and Sidon. As he's going to talk about in verse 3, the way that they are doing really well right now, but in verse 4, that is about to change as God is about to strip them of their possessions. He's then going to go on in verses 5 through 9, roughly, to talk about the decline of Philistia. I'm pretty sure it's the land of the Philistines. Why? Because once again, he's going to go through a number of cities or regions in there, and they are famous cities from the days of the old conflict between Israel and the Philistines. And so by the time we get to verse 9, he is not only talking about the way he is looking out for his people, but he is talking about his direct intervention on behalf of his people against those who would oppress them, as he is talking about the days in which he will end oppression in Israel, or specifically Judah. Verses 9 through 13, then talking about that future in which they can expect more out of life, because at least as far as their external oppressors, they are a thing of the past. Beginning with a very famous passage that is quoted even in the Gospels. It's going to point forward to the Christ, it seems, when it says, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. Righteous and having salvation is he, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." So he's then going to go on to talk about, again in verse 10, the way he's going to cut off the chariot from Ephraim and the war horse from Jerusalem, as we mentioned, potentially exclusively or potentially only talking about the way in which he is removing the presence of external oppressors from his people, but understanding that the history of his people is to experience a certain level or an extended, or an exaggerated reliance on their own power, the symbols of their own power, when they are free from oppression. It may be also talking about the way in which he is removing their temptation to get an inflated sense of security based upon the symbols of their own power. So it could simply be the chariots and the horsemen of their oppressors, but it could be likewise the degree to which he is going to give them a peace that goes beyond the symbols of their power once they are free from external challenges. Going on, though, in verse 11, he is going to talk about the way in which the blood of his covenant is going to be that which provides for their peace, meaning it could simply be talking about Israel now, but this could be talking about the new covenant, understanding that by the time we get to chapter 11, he is going to talk about the way in which he is annulling the covenant with his people, the covenant of favor, and I think it's also the covenant of peace in chapter 11. And if it is the covenant of peace, then it is, union. Then it's the covenant of union between Israel and Judah, pointing forward to a new covenant. And so just as the earlier verses are talking about the Christ, seems like he could be talking about a larger peace than simply the peace he's bringing to his people, Jerusalem. Either way, going on, he is going to talk about the way that they will be able to return to their strongholds. Those he is going to describe as prisoners of hope in the ESV. I don't literally know what that means. I don't want to take another tangent, but what I do understand, I think at least, is in the next verse, the way that he is going to restore double for the troubles that they have gone through. I'm not trying to rhyme, but that's a familiar theme, that whatever they have lost is only a fraction of what they can expect to enjoy in the days of their restoration. Not only that, no matter how small they might have seemed in comparison to their enemies before, verse 13 is going to describe them as a weapon in God's hands, describing it this way, saying that Judah is going to be as a bow bent in his hand. Having made Ephraim as the arrows, he is going to stir up Zion, this time specifically against Greece, as he is going to wield his people like a sword. The last section of the chapter, going from verses 14 through 17, again pointing forward to the way that God is personally going to intervene on behalf of his people, saying he will appear and go forth like lightning, sounding the trumpet and marching forth in the whirlwinds of the south. Verse 15, literally saying, the Lord of hosts will protect them. Then shifting to describe what that means for them, they shall devour and tread down the sling stones, and they shall drink and roar. It's going to literally say, as if drunk with wine, and be filled like a bowl, as verses 16 and 17 are going to go on to describe the way in which they will be radiant as the jewels of a crown, seeming to point forward once again to that familiar theme that we see, where when our character is something that God no longer has to, we don't have to be ashamed, but something he's no longer ashamed of, and he puts us on display as an example of what he wants all people to strive for in terms of character, and an example of what he will then do to bless us beyond our own ability. And so as he is now restoring an imperfect people to a place of a genuine human decency, verse 17 is going to conclude this way. For how great is his goodness, and how great is his beauty. Grain shall make the young men flourish, and new wine the young women. This passage reminding me that just as price being equal, we might pick a cell phone carrier who has not only great quality, but a guarantee that there are absolutely no drops in coverage. Verse, 10 is going to remind us of the scope of his rule when, as we have it titled, it's going to say, his rule shall be from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the earth. Expanding our understanding on the concept we talked about before. Not only is he providing us a post-drama environment, he's providing that environment without the need to worry about certain pockets of unnecessary conflict, because there are no drops in his coverage, or there's no drops in the area where we can expect him to provide the peace that surpasses all understanding.